I stared at my reflection in the restaurant's bathroom mirror, smoothing down my dress for the 100th time. The weight of the engagement ring on my finger still felt new, like it didn't quite belong there. Just like I didn't quite belong here, about to have dinner with my future mother-in-law for the first time. My name is Cassidy, but everyone calls me Cass. At 27, I thought I had my life pretty well figured out. Great job at an accounting firm, a wonderful fiancé, and a healthy lifestyle I'd worked hard to maintain. But nothing could have prepared me for Margaret Reynolds. "You look beautiful," Ethan whispered as I returned to our private dining room at LeBlanc. He squeezed my hand under the table, but his reassuring smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I should have noticed that warning sign. Margaret sat across from us, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. Her eyes scanned me up and down, lingering just a bit too long on my slim frame. "Dear, you really must try the pasta here. You look like you could use some meat on those bones." "Mom," Ethan warned, but she waved him off. "I'm just concerned, darling. How can she possibly handle the demands of being a wife and mother if she's barely strong enough to carry her own purse?" The words hit like a slap. I forced a smile, years of therapy helping me keep my composure. "I appreciate your concern, Margaret, but I'm actually quite healthy." "Of course you are, dear." Her tone dripped with honey-coated venom. She turned to her husband, David, who seemed suddenly fascinated by his menu. "Remember Caroline? From Ethan's college years? Such a robust, healthy girl. Whatever happened to her?" I excused myself to the bathroom again, but this time I lingered by the door on my way back. Margaret's voice carried clearly through the gap. "She's completely wrong for him, David. Look at her, all bones and career ambition. What kind of mother would she make? What kind of wife? Our son deserves better than some waif who probably survives on air and lettuce." "Margaret, please," David's quiet voice responded. "Give her a chance." "Oh, I'll give her a chance all right," Margaret muttered. "I'll give her exactly the chance she deserves." I stood there, frozen, as her words sank in. Something in her tone made my skin crawl. This wasn't just a disapproving mother-in-law. This was something else entirely. As I walked back to the table on shaking legs, I caught Margaret's smile. It reminded me of a cat watching a wounded bird, patient and predatory. I just didn't realize then that I was the bird. The morning after that disastrous dinner, I found myself sitting in my mother's kitchen, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Mom always knew when something was wrong. Maybe it was the way I'd shown up unannounced at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, still wearing yesterday's mascara. "She actually said that? About your weight?" Mom's face darkened as I recounted Margaret's comments. "Honey, that's not normal mother-in-law behavior. That's just cruel." I traced the rim of my mug. "Ethan says she's just old-fashioned. That she'll come around once she gets to know me better." Even as I said it, I remembered Margaret's predatory smile. The way her eyes had followed me all evening. My phone buzzed. Another text from Margaret, just sending some wedding venue suggestions. "All include excellent catering. You'll need your strength for the big day." Smiling face with smiling eyes. Mom peered at the message and frowned. That woman's about as subtle as a brick through a window. She squeezed my shoulder. "You need to tell Ethan how this makes you feel." But telling Ethan wasn't that simple. When I got home, he was already defensive, pacing our living room. "My mother called," he said, running his hands through his hair. "She thinks you left early because you were upset with her." "Upset with her?" I laughed, but it came out sharp. "She spent the entire evening making comments about my weight and comparing me to your college girlfriend." "She's just worried about you, Cass. In her own way." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe if you ate more at dinner." "Stop." My voice shook. "Just stop. You're doing exactly what she wants, making me feel like I'm the problem." "That's not fair," he protested. "I'm trying to keep the peace here." "Peace." I grabbed my phone, showing him his mother's latest text. "This isn't peace, Ethan. This is your mother trying to tear me down, one concerned comment at a time." His face softened. "Look, let's have dinner with them again next week. Give her another chance." For me, I wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed to protect myself. But I loved him, and that made me stupid.
Fine.
One more chance. What I didn't tell him was how I'd seen Margaret at the grocery store that morning, talking to Mrs. Chun from our apartment building. I'd stayed hidden behind the cereal aisle, listening as Margaret's voice carried clearly. Poor Ethan. She's clearly got some sort of eating disorder. I'm just terrified she'll pass these issues on to my future grandchildren. I gripped my phone tighter, Margaret's latest text still glowing on the screen. One more chance, I thought. But this time, I'd be ready for whatever game she was playing. I just didn't realize yet how dangerous that game would become. The bridal shop's bell chimed as I walked in for my final fitting. My stomach dropped when I saw Margaret already there, chatting with a seamstress. She wasn't supposed to be here. I'd specifically scheduled this appointment when I knew she had her weekly tennis game. Surprise. Margaret's smile didn't reach her eyes. I thought we could make this a proper mother-daughter moment. The seamstress, Sarah, looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Reynolds was just telling me about some concerns regarding the dress measurements.
Of course she was.
I forced myself to stay calm as I stepped onto the platform. The wedding dress, which had fit perfectly 2 weeks ago, now hung loose in places it shouldn't. See. Margaret's voice dripped with concern. The dress is practically falling off her. Sarah, surely you can see this isn't healthy. The measurements are exactly what we took last time, Sarah said, checking her notes. Nothing's changed. But Margaret was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling Dr. Matthews. He's a wonderful eating disorder specialist. Stop. My voice came out stronger than I expected. This needs to end, Margaret. I'm only trying to help, dear. Everyone's worried. The ladies at church, our family friends. She paused, letting that sink in. Even Ethan called me yesterday, concerned about your habits. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Ethan had promised he was on my side. Had he really gone behind my back to his mother? My phone buzzed, a message from Lisa at work. Hey, weird question, but did you know Ethan's mom was asking about your medical history? Said she needed it for wedding insurance. The room spun. I stepped down from the platform, still in the wedding dress. Sarah, could you give us a minute? Once we were alone, I turned to Margaret.
You're spreading rumors about me.
Asking about my medical records. Why? Because you're not right for him, she said simply. A mother knows. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect my son. From what? From being happy. From making a mistake he'll regret forever. She stepped closer. Did you really think someone like you could fit into our family? Look at yourself. You can't even maintain a healthy weight for your wedding day. Something snapped inside me. The dress fits perfectly. The only thing wrong here is you, Margaret. And I'm done letting you poison everything about this wedding. I walked out of the bridal shop still wearing the dress, ignoring Margaret's calls behind me. In my car, I finally let the tears fall. My phone kept buzzing, Ethan's name flashing on the screen. I declined the call. Instead, I dialed my mother. Mom, I need your help. I think I need to call off the wedding. What I didn't know then was that Margaret had already set something much worse in motion, something that would make a canceled wedding look like child's play. 3 days after walking out of the bridal shop, I still hadn't spoken to Ethan. My phone was a graveyard of his missed calls and unread messages. I'd moved in with my mom temporarily, telling my boss I needed to work remotely due to family issues. The doorbell rang. I expected Ethan, but found David, my almost father-in-law, standing there instead. Can we talk? He asked quietly.
Not as your future-in-law.
Just as someone who sees what's happening. We sat in Mom's garden. David looked older somehow, tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. Margaret wasn't always like this, he said, staring at his hands. When Ethan's sister died, I straightened. Ethan doesn't have a sister. Had. David's voice cracked.
Sarah.
She was 19 when we lost her to anorexia. Margaret. She saw the signs but couldn't save her. That's why she's. He trailed off. The revelation hit me like a thunderbolt. Why didn't Ethan tell me? He was young when it happened. Margaret made us promise never to discuss it. She thinks she's protecting him by controlling everything in his life. David pulled out an envelope. But she's gone too far this time. Inside were printouts of emails, dozens of them. Margaret writing to our wedding vendors, canceling appointments. Margaret contacting my old doctors, trying to access my medical records. Margaret writing to my firm's HR department, expressing concerns about my mental stability. She's trying to destroy my life, I whispered. She's trying to save Ethan the only way she knows how. David stood up. I love my wife, but this has to stop. I thought you should know what you're dealing with. My phone buzzed Ethan again.
This time I answered.
Cass, please, he started. Mom's just worried. About me ending up like Sarah? The silence was deafening.
How?
His voice shook. Who told you? It doesn't matter. What matters is you let her do this. You knew why she was attacking me, and you said nothing. I didn't want to lose you both, he whispered. Well, congratulations. You might just get your wish. I hung up as my phone dinged with a new email. It was from my firm's HR department, requesting a meeting about concerns raised regarding my fitness for client interaction. My hands shook as I forwarded the email to my lawyer friend. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. Margaret wasn't just trying to break us up, she was trying to break me completely.
Fine.
If she wanted a war, she'd get one. But I had something Sarah never had. The truth about what Margaret Reynolds was capable of. And I intended to use it. After weeks of tense negotiations and forced smiles, the wedding day arrived. I stood in the bridal suite, my mother adjusting my veil, when Margaret appeared with a bottle of champagne. A peace offering, she said, pouring 3 glasses. To new beginnings. Mom eyed the champagne suspiciously, but Margaret was already raising her glass. To family, the champagne tasted off, bitter, almost metallic. I set it aside after one sip, catching Margaret's fleeting frown. 20 minutes later, the room started spinning. My hands trembled as I tried to stand, my vision blurring at the edges. Mom,
My voice sounded distant, wrong.
Cassidy. Mom's face swam before me. Something's wrong. Call an ambulance. Oh, she's just having pre-wedding jitters, Margaret said smoothly. Perhaps she hasn't been eating properly again. The next thing I knew, I was in the emergency room, the wedding dress replaced by a hospital gown. Through my haze, I heard voices outside my room. The blood tests showed traces of ipecac syrup, a doctor was saying, combined with the anti-anxiety medication in her system. Anti-anxiety medication? Mom's voice rose. My daughter isn't on any medication. According to her medical records, she was prescribed. Those records are wrong, Mom snapped. Someone falsified them. And I think I know who. I tried to focus, to piece it together. The champagne. The bitter taste. Margaret's insistence that I drink it. The falsified medical records that could have made this look like an accidental overdose. Ethan burst into the room, still in his tuxedo. Cass? Oh God, are you okay? Your mother, I whispered. She tried to. Don't be ridiculous. Margaret's voice cut in as she followed him. The poor girl's clearly been struggling with substances. I tried to tell you, Ethan. The signs were all there. I caught her eye then, saw something dark and satisfied in her expression. She thought she'd won. That this would prove everything she'd been saying about me. But she'd made a mistake. The champagne glasses were still in the bridal suite. And my mother, who'd watched Margaret pour them, hadn't taken a single sip. Check the champagne bottle, I told the doctor. The one in my dressing room. Margaret's face went pale. I already cleaned up. Didn't want the venue to be a mess with everything canceled. Of course you did, I said quietly. But you forgot about the security cameras in the hallway, didn't you? The ones that would show you bringing in that bottle. Just like they'd show you accessing my room last night. For the first time, I saw real fear in Margaret Reynolds' eyes. And I realized this wasn't about protecting Ethan anymore. This was about destroying me, completely and permanently. The game had changed. And so had I. 2 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, I sat across from Margaret at her dining room table. The security footage had mysteriously disappeared, and without it, everything was just my word against hers. But I had one last card to play. I'm glad you agreed to dinner, Margaret said, serving the pasta. We need to put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us. Ethan sat between us, tension radiating from his rigid posture. David watched silently from his end of the table, his eyes darting between his wife and me. "You're right," I said, switching my plate with Ethan's. "Let's clear things up." Margaret's fork clattered against her plate. "What are you doing?" "Just being careful." I smiled, switching Margaret's plate with mine. "You understand, don't you? After the champagne incident." "Cass," Ethan warned, but I wasn't done. "Tell them, Margaret. Tell them about Sarah." The room went deadly quiet. Margaret's face drained of color. "How dare you?" she started, but David cut her off. "Let her speak, Margaret. Your daughter," I continued, my voice shaking. "The one you couldn't save. Is that why you tried to destroy me? Because I reminded you of her." Margaret stood so quickly her chair toppled backward. "You know nothing about Sarah. I know you falsified my medical records. I know you tried to poison me at my own wedding. All because you couldn't stand the thought of losing control over Ethan like you lost control over Sarah." "Mom," Ethan's voice cracked. "Is this true?" Margaret laughed, but it sounded unhinged. "Of course not. She's manipulating you, just like she's been doing all along." David did him. But David stayed silent, tears streaming down his face. "The police have the champagne bottle," I said quietly. "They found traces of Ipecac and my prescription anxiety medications, the ones you forged in my name. It's over, Margaret." She moved so fast, I barely saw it coming. The pasta dish flew at my head, missing by inches. "You're just like her," Margaret screamed. "Trying to take my son away. I won't let you destroy this family." "Mom, stop." Ethan grabbed her arms as she reached for another dish. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "I had to protect you. She'll leave you, just like Sarah left us. They always leave." I stood up, backing away. "Sarah didn't leave, Margaret. She died. Because you couldn't accept that she needed help, not control." Margaret collapsed into Ethan's arms, her body racked with sobs. But as I turned to leave, I caught her eye. Behind the tears, I saw something calculating, something dangerous. I'd won this battle, but Margaret Reynolds wasn't done fighting. And somehow, I knew her next move would make the wedding incident look like child's play. I just didn't know how right I was. The police arrived just as Margaret reached for the kitchen knife. I hadn't meant for it to go this far, but her confession was already recording on my phone, hidden in my pocket. "I did it for you, Ethan." Margaret's voice rose hysterically. "Just like I did everything for Sarah. And look how she repaid me. By dying. By leaving us." "Put the knife down, Mom," Ethan said quietly, positioning himself between us. "It's over. It's never over." Her laugh sent chills down my spine. "Ask David. Tell them, dear. Tell them what happened after Sarah died. About the other girls who tried to take our son away." David's face went ashen. "Margaret, don't." "Caroline wasn't the first, was she?" I said, pieces clicking into place. "How many others were there? How many girls did you drive away to protect Ethan? They were all wrong for him." The knife trembled in her grip. "Just like you. Just like Sarah was wrong. Was sick. Was bulimic." David cut in, his voice breaking. "And you knew. You knew for months, but kept saying she was just being dramatic. Until that night." "Shut up." Margaret slashed the air with a knife. "I was helping her, teaching her discipline. If she'd just listened, she'd still be alive." David roared, making us all jump. "Our daughter would be alive if you hadn't hidden her illness, convinced everyone she was fine, stopped her from getting help." Ethan staggered back like he'd been hit.
"Dad."
"Your sister died because your mother couldn't stand the thought of anyone knowing our family wasn't perfect." David's words fell like stones in the silence. "And now she's doing it again. With Cass. With anyone who threatens her control." Margaret lunged then, not at me, but at David. The knife caught his arm as officers burst through the door. In the chaos that followed, I found myself staring at Margaret as they handcuffed her, seeing not a monster, but a broken woman destroyed by her own desperate need for control. "I forgive you," I said softly, surprising myself. Not for me, but for Sarah. Because she never got the chance. Something crumbled in Margaret's face. For a moment, I saw past the manipulation and hatred to the grief she'd never allowed herself to feel. Then her eyes hardened again. You think this is over? She spat as they led her away. This will never be over. He'll always be my son. Ethan took my hand, his face wet with tears. No, Mom. I'm not just your son anymore. I'm Sarah's brother. And Cass's husband, if she'll still have me. In that moment, watching Margaret's face as her last bit of control slipped away, I realized revenge wasn't what I'd wanted after all. Sometimes justice comes not from making someone suffer, but from finally forcing them to face the truth they've been running from all along. 6 months after Margaret's arrest, I stood in Sarah's old bedroom, helping David pack up the last of her things. The room had remained untouched for nearly a decade, a shrine to Margaret's denial. She's starting therapy in prison, David said quietly, handling a worn ballet slipper. The doctors say she's finally talking about Sarah. Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding a dusty photo album. Dad, look what I found. We gathered around the kitchen table, flipping through images of a smiling teenage girl who shared Ethan's eyes. Sarah beamed from every photo, but as the pages turned, her smile grew strained, her face gaunt. The last photo showed her at a family dinner, wearing the same forced smile I'd worn at my first meal with Margaret. I have something for you, David said, sliding an envelope across the table. Inside was a letter, written in Margaret's precise handwriting. You don't have to read it, Ethan said quickly. But I did. I had to. Dear Cassidy, it began. I see her in every photo now. The signs I refused to acknowledge. The pain I dismissed. When I looked at you, I saw Sarah, not as she was, but as I feared her to be. A threat to my perfect family. I couldn't save her from herself, so I tried to save Ethan from you. I was wrong. About everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope someday you'll understand that I was fighting my own ghosts, not you. I folded the letter carefully. Will you visit her? Ethan squeezed my hand. We're taking it slow. Monthly visits, with her therapist present. Dad thinks. He thinks she's finally ready to face what happened. And us. I asked the question that had haunted me since that night. We're getting married next month, he smiled. Small ceremony, just family. Real family, the kind that heals instead of hurts. Later that night, as we drove home, I noticed a small box in my purse. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a butterfly charm. A note in David's handwriting read, it was Sarah's. She always said butterflies reminded her that change is possible, even when it seems impossible. Welcome to the family, Cassidy. I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, thinking about Margaret, about Sarah, about the thin line between protection and destruction, about how healing sometimes means letting go of the revenge we thought we wanted. The butterfly charm caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the dashboard. Somewhere in a prison therapy room, Margaret was finally facing her demons. In Sarah's old room, David was learning to remember his daughter, without guilt. And here, beside me, Ethan was choosing love over fear. Sometimes the happy ending isn't about winning or losing. Sometimes it's about breaking cycles, facing truths, and finding the strength to begin again. Even if that beginning comes with a few scars.